Hi guys, welcome again to Science in 5. Shandises. In this video we're going to discuss how to use the big four or the four equations of motion. Now there are three things that you need to quickly pick up if you want to have success with the big four equations of motion. The first thing you need to pick up quickly is that these four equations of motion have got three vectors: the acceleration vector, the velocity vector, and the displacement vector. So anytime you're performing a calculation involving the big four, make sure that you see the direction of the vectors. For example, if an object is thrown vertically upwards in the absence of air friction, it means that the acceleration of the object is going to be downwards. So the initial velocity and the acceleration are in opposite direction. So when I'm adding the values into that formula, when I'm substituting, I cannot give them the same sign. One of them has to be negative. Okay. So because you are aware of the direction nature of the vectors, it's always easy to say, let the direction of motion be positive. Let the initial direction of motion be positive. In that way, for an object projected up, the acceleration is going to be negative. Okay, so appreciate the vector nature of those three vectors. Make a sketch if needs be. It will help you. It will help you see. More often than ever, learners make mistakes, small mistakes. They put the wrong sign on the value. Instead of making a negative, they make it a positive and something like that. And then the calculation ends up wrong. The second thing that you quickly need to pick up involving the big four is that you can only use the big four equations of motion when the acceleration is constant. So when the acceleration is constant, it means the net force is also constant. So we have a system of forces acting, and the net force and those system of forces continue in the same manner, and they produce a constant resultant force. We know that a constant resultant force produces a constant acceleration. You can apply the big four equations of motion. The question does not necessarily have to give you a hint and say, oh, it's about motion. It could start off with force. It might be about forces. Forces acting on an object. Forces. F net equals ma. Get the acceleration and then use the big four equations of motion. So when the acceleration is constant, we can apply the big four equations of motion. Then the third and important thing that you need to quickly pick up is that each of those big four equations of motion have four quantities. So if you can get three quantities from a question, it means the fourth one will be the missing quantity, the required quantity, the one that you want to calculate. You form a simple linear equation. You substitute your three quantities, the fourth one is the required quantity, and you solve. So once you can get three quantities, it means you can choose an equation. Once you can be able to list three variables or three important quantities from the question, and the fourth quantity, which is the one you're calculating, you'll be able to use any one of the big four to solve a problem. And if you find yourself in a space where you've got more than four quantities, it means you can use more than one equation of motion. So there's a situation where you can use an alternative form of, you can use this equation or you can use that equation, and you will still arrive at the same answer. So remember those three important tips, okay, for the big four equations of motion when you practice your calculations. So what's going to happen now in the next section of this same video, we're going to just look at a few examples of how to apply the big four equations of motion encompassing those skills.